Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sharpest Call of Duty League podcast. My name is Robert, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, CDLMetrics. Yeah, how's it going? We've turned the calendar now. We're solidly into March. How's the weather down a bit more south?
It's been better lately. It's starting to warm up a little bit, which has been nice. And yeah, I'd say it's a pretty exciting time in the sports calendar. I know we don't have football. That is the one bummer, but CDL is in full swing. We're just a couple weeks away from Major 2, and I'm a huge college basketball fan. And this week is championship week, so like every D1 conference is holding their own conference tournament. Those have all been super exciting, and we still have, I don't know, 15 more to get through before the weekend is over. And then March Madness starts the following weekend, which is my favorite playoff format in any sort of sporting event. It is the absolute best. And yeah, I'm super excited. Usually week 5, where we're at now, would be like the last week of a qualifier period, and we can start talking about how the bracket might look for Major 2. But we still have one more week of qualifiers after this week, because we're doing the full round robin. So it's 6 weeks of qualifiers. That is a lot, but we are at least getting the full 11 matches per team. But yeah, still excited to talk this week's matches and maybe feel out where the bracket will shake out a week from now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. March Madness is great. I know you probably do as well, but I've built my own March Madness model or like college basketball model. I've been testing that for the last couple of months. I think it's finally about ready to leave the lab. So we'll be looking at that very shortly. But yeah, there's no football, but there's still a lot of good sports if you know where to look for it. So moving on, last week's games, not great for me, much better for you. I was very heavily let down by Cloud9. I believed in them. I should not have. You also did too, to be fair. Actually, more than me, technically. But yeah, no, apparently this Cloud9 team is just bad. So they're going to go 2-0 this weekend, probably. That being said, though, just the continual fading of this Paris team. We're going to talk a bit more of this in their games this week, but they're just not. Something is wrong. Call it a hangover after Major 1. That happens with some teams, but something's just off with them. So I don't know. What happened with your games last week?
Yeah, I took some big swings on underdogs on the money line for all three of my picks, I should say, thinking that maybe one would come through. If two came through, great. And actually, yeah, two did come through. The Riyadh Toronto thing, I just felt, and even still, I think Riyadh and Toronto are in the same tier of team. I know Riyadh did sweep them, so maybe you give Riyadh a slight edge right now that they are a better team, but Toronto is competitive, Riyadh is competitive. Neither are like even close to Optic now, but those kind of teams, I'd maybe throw Miami in that mix too. Those G2 if you want. Those teams are squarely in the middle of the pack, but not too far behind the LA Thieveses of the world. I think you can argue like Paris and Vegas have struggled, and maybe they are in that tier now with those teams. So yeah, I just thought Riyadh was a way too big of an underdog, and they came through. The Vegas Thieves thing, the same argument. Like Vegas had been struggling, but I truly believe that was a coin flip game. Sure enough, it goes to a map 5, and Vegas were able to come through. So happy that I had the plus 150 there. The last one, yeah, I was with you on Cloud9 thinking they are the worst team in the league, but Vancouver hasn't shown us much throughout the year. And sure enough, Vancouver go out and have probably the best week of their season so far, beating Cloud9 in a 3-1, and then going out and beating Paris in a 3-1 fashion on Sunday. So Cloud9, yeah, I think it's just like really tough to trust them right now. Like they'll probably win a map here or there off of these kind of mediocre to average teams, and they're really going to struggle to win a map against the high up teams in the league. That series they had against Paris is still in the back of my mind, though. The fact that they pulled off that upset was crazy. But yeah, just a tough team to figure out. And all signs kind of point to they probably won't even be there at Major 2, which I guess wouldn't be a shocker to most people.
Yeah. Moving on. So the combined model plays, again, heavily hurt by the Cloud9 ones here. And Minnesota, they played. Who did they play
Miami
here?
on Friday.
Miami, yes. Miami, and then obviously Vegas weirdly beat Thieves, and then they lost to Optic, yeah. And then just looked bad against Optic. Boston, yeah, Carolina plus 1.5. But This came through, though. The Riyadh money line came through. That was pretty good. So not all is lost, but again, yeah, Cloud9 heavily letting us down. So, yeah, any other thoughts for you from last week?
No, I think the big one, I mentioned it last week when we went over these plays. The big one that stuck out to me was Riyadh. The fact that both of our models were that into them against Toronto on Saturday, where they showed value across the board. And sure enough, Riyadh came through and swept them easily. So that was obviously a huge win for us. And just pointed to the model, yeah, just not overestimating Toronto. For some reason, I think the market over the last couple weeks has been super high on Toronto with the new roster. And I think they have improved drastically from where they were, but I don't think they're like in that tier of contending teams. Could they get there? Sure, but I think right now they're squarely pretty close with Riyadh and Miami and those sort of teams in the middle. But yeah, you mentioned it already. The Cloud9 stuff didn't come through again. I'm guessing we'll have them listed as combined model plays for a while, but we'll play it safe with that sort of team moving forward.
Yeah. Moving on to league news. Again, just a recap of the games last week. Weirdly, a lot of 3-0s. There was like three 3-0s on Saturday. And then we had the game force here. And then it's weird, right? In a game of 11, in a week with 11 games, five of them ended in 3-0. And only two of those 11 games made it to game five. And it's weird because in a lot of these, it's not necessarily that we're seeing, and I'll highlight a couple of them here. Paris versus Minnesota, Toronto versus Riyadh here. Who else? There's a couple of these where it's even to a lesser extent down here, Vancouver versus Paris. You see these games, I think Miami also, because Miami I believe is the underdog in this game as well too. You see these games where a team is a favorite, an outright favorite in the game, and not only do they lose, but they lose like 3-0 or 3-1. And that normally doesn't happen. Normally what happens is, and you can go back to the history of the CDL, go back several years here. If a team is a favorite, now sometimes they lose. It's not no favorite has ever lost. That's definitely not true. But generally, you will see them at least get to a game four, maybe a game five, usually a game five. Usually an upset will come on like a round 10 or 11, search and destroy in game five. That's usually how this goes. Usually you'll see an upset in the hard point, then usually the favorite team will come back and win the search. Then maybe they'll get in trouble in the control or what was control / overload. And then, or maybe the other team, maybe they go up 2-1 after the overload or control, and then the underdog pulls off the hard point upset, or maybe the favorite there's usually combinations where usually this ends in game 4 or 5. This is the first time ever where I've seen just a team comes out, they look better, and they just sweep. That is very rare. And what are your thoughts on that? Because that to me is weirding me out a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I was going to look into this a week or two ago, and I just haven't had the time, but it is something I will look into maybe for next week's pod or maybe before Major 2 kicks off, because I do want to see what percentage of series this year are ending in a sweep and a map 4 and a map 5 and compare those rates to last season, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because it does feel like we have so many sweeps this year. And like you said, a lot of them feel like the underdog is winning very quickly. I don't know what it is about this game where if you just have a good day, like you just can steamroll through a team. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because it doesn't feel like the league itself is tiered out very clearly, where it's like we have two teams at the top and then a clear cutoff and then another three and then another cutoff and then another three or whatever. It's like it feels like we have one team who is just destroying everybody right now, a cluster of teams that we think are good, another cluster of teams that we think are fine to mediocre, and then like maybe one team at the very bottom who's bad. So if you have that sort of clustering of teams, you would think, okay, if we get those matches where, two teams from the same tier are facing off, like on Friday afternoon, Miami versus Minnesota, I would be shocked if anyone predicted that to end in a 3-0 one way or the other. And I'm sure some people did in their pick'ems and stuff. But if you're picking that game, you're probably saying it's a 3-1 or a 3-2. Same thing for Paris and Minnesota. And that was actually the underdog that came out on top. And again, they came out on top very quickly in a 3-0 fashion. So, yeah, it does feel like we're getting more of that. I don't know what about the game is making it that way. And I'm curious to see if it stabilizes down the stretch where maybe we'll start to get more game fives in the future. But yeah, right now it does feel like there is a serious lack of those, at least on the online play, and which we've had for the vast majority of the season this year. So yeah, curious to see if that continues going forward. But it is part of the reason why, like last week for the picks that I made, I took underdogs and I just said, I don't even care about +1.5. Like, I'm just going to take them to win and see what happens, because I've been seeing that trend lately of just like, the +1.5 is nice if you get into a very specific match where it's like, I have the underdog team. I think they're very competitive in hard point, because that +1.5 can carry you all the way if you're good hard points. If they're an underdog, I think is scrappy across the board, or if they specialize in search or overload or something else, I'm just going to take them to win. And probably it'll take a game five, but don't be shocked if it goes quicker than that. Yeah, long story short, it is very interesting. I hope we get more game fives in the future, but I'll report back in a week or two about the rates of sweeps this year compared to previous years.
Yeah, I what I suspect you're gonna see is the rate of sweeps is the highest probably since Cold War, but that is not the same, because what it's gonna show a bunch of Toronto and Atlanta's 3-0s and a couple other teams in there that were better in that lead in that year. And then, but the problem is that it's not the same kind of sweeps, because in that year it'd be like, oh, okay, Toronto's just going to win this 3-0, or this team is better than this team, they're going to win 3-0 or 3-1, right? It's not, oh, this team's a better team, the underdog's going to win 3-0. It is so weird. And again, I'm obviously pointing out this week, obviously with Miami here, with Minnesota, Paris, with Riyadh, Toronto, and even to a lesser extent, not exactly the same thing, but to a lesser extent here, Paris versus Seattle. And this is not just this week. You go back a couple of weeks. I've been noticing it for a couple of weeks. And again, obviously, you don't want to say one point does not a trend make, but we're now seeing this for several weeks now. I'm seeing this where an underdog will just win straight up outright 3-0. And it just seems like this game is so completely based on momentum. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something you have to keep in mind when you're picking this. So that's my take on that. But anyway, we'll wait on your analysis for this. The expected wins. So we've got Optic at 10.2 wins again. So basically, I think is that they're undefeated, right, in the qualifiers. Basically, yeah, 3 wins to go. I think if they sweep those, they will have. Or no, they lost. Did they lose a game? No,
No, they
right.
are.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
perfect
Yeah.
8-0. So yeah, my
Yeah.
number just shows that it's likelier they go 2-1 than 3-0. But the 11-0 finish is very much on the table for Optic. Let me just quick pull up their schedule going forward. So this week only game is against Paris, which is very interesting. I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time on that one. And then a week from now they play Falcons and I almost said Ultra, but it's Koi. So yeah, I would say that's maybe a tougher stretch for Optic. And I know this was touched on a couple weeks ago when we mentioned, oh, Optic are 4-0 or 6-0 or whatever they were. Can they finish strong with a harder back half of their schedule? And it looks like they're going to. So maybe they trip up once, but yeah, right now they look like the clear-cut number 1 seed. Yeah, 8-0 so far. I'm not even sure another team gets to 8 wins and they're already there. Yeah, they look like the real deal right now, favorites to win Major 2. Curious to see if any other teams can maybe make a case, but right now it looks like it's all Optic. And then, yeah, we have a really tight cluster of teams seeded 2 through 6, which is fun. Another cluster of teams seeded 7 through 11, and then you have Cloud9 at the bottom there. So, yeah, Cloud9 to me feel like a team that can't make it. They definitely still can. They have 4 remaining games. So, they can get all the way up to 5 wins. If you get to 5 wins, you're probably in the play-in before the actual bracket play. So it's there for them. They can do it. I just think based on their win probabilities, maybe they get one more win, maybe they don't. It's that for me where it's like they'll finish 1-10 or 2-9, and that's probably not going to make the play-in at all, considering that every other team in the league has 3 or more wins already. So this is the weirdness where we talked about there are these clusters of teams, and it feels like a very competitive league, but we're getting so many sweeps because you have all these teams seeded 2 through 6 in my model that are between 5.7 and 6.5 wins. Some will underachieve, some will overachieve. I'm sure we'll get some 7-win teams, maybe an 8-win team in there, and maybe some teams don't do as well down the stretch and only finish with 5 or so. But yeah, it's really tight between those 2 through 6s. And then right now, the play in, interestingly enough, I have Vegas and Paris both in that, both finishing about 5 wins. One thing with Vegas, right, they're struggling. They did bounce back nicely with a win over LA Thieves last week, but they only have 3 remaining games. So that is a big deal. Like they can only get to 6-5 if they go perfect. My numbers seem to say they'll probably go 2-1, finish 5-6, which if you asked me that, or if you told me that before the major 2 qualifiers kicked off, that Vegas will be 5-6 and in the play-in game, I would not have believed you for a second. And if you followed that up with Paris are going to be 5-6 and also in the play-in game, I would have been stunned. So the fact that we're here is crazy. And yeah, Vancouver and Boston, I'll just touch on briefly. That kind of right now looks like the battle for the play-in spot. So to me, one of those teams is going to make it. One of those teams is probably not. They have already played head-to-head, and Vancouver did get the best of Boston. I'm not 100% sure on what the tiebreaker procedure is for if there's only 2 teams that are tied for a spot. If Vancouver and Boston both finish with 4 wins, and that is the cut line, and no other team has 4 wins. If it is head to head, we know Vancouver win that. But if it goes to maps, I'm not exactly sure how it'll play out. But yeah, Vancouver 4 remaining matches, Boston only 3, so that's giving Vancouver the slight bump for me. But yeah, a lot to play out in the next 2 weeks. We have 11 matches this week, 11 matches next week. But just based on what I have for win projections, it's going to be chaotic. And I'm really, really excited to track how these seeds play out over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And one interesting thing you said about the league, and I think we both were in agreement. There's one team that's the best team, right? It's crushing everyone, right? That's obviously Optic. In my opinion, there's not, a tier below and then another tier below. I honestly just think there is just all of these teams here. From Miami all the way, I put all these in one group as just the middle teams, and I put these 3 as the worst teams. If you want to put Cloud9 as the worst team, okay, yeah, sure. Last week didn't really help their cause very much for that, but sure, fine. But I'm not really, I view all 3 of these together as one team, and I view these as one. Like, this is all, there's only 3 tiers, basically. If you want to do a 4th tier and have Cloud9's own tier below, sure, that's fine. But this is basically what it is. There is, what is that? That's 8 teams. The top team, the next 8 teams. No, next 8. Top team, next 8, and then the bottom 3. And then that's it. That's, in my opinion, what it is. Because honestly, maybe if you want to put Carolina in the tier below, that's fine. But honestly, on any given day, any of these 8 can beat each other. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's my take on that, at least. Moving on to the match preview. So, first match of the week, Toronto versus Cloud9. Cloud9 only, Toronto only negative 5,000 on the money line, minus 2.5, minus 150, minus 1,000 in the hard point. Apparently, they have some life in the search and destroy, and then minus 1,000 in the overload. My model is, it's not high on Cloud9, but it's higher than that number. But honestly, I can't bring myself to bet this. There's no way. I'm not doing this. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think I could bring myself to bet the minus 2.5, but I'm definitely not betting the plus 2.5 either. That's not happening. I would infinitely rather bet a Toronto minus spread in this hard point than anything else here. Maybe you could put a Cloud9 plus, I don't know, is it 1.5, 2.5 in the hard point? I don't know. Maybe I could bring myself to do that, but even then, that's still a bit iffy. What do you see here?
Yeah, so I actually did almost include this in my 3 picks of the week. I almost have Cloud9 plus 2.5 as a good enough play, and I think you can justify it. It is really hard, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, it's really a play on Cloud9 in map 2. They are, yeah, plus 240 to win the search and destroy in map 2. I'm not sure if it would be plus 1.5 or plus 2.5, but again, in this crazy world of like underdogs do surprising things this year, I would just rather take the plus 240 for them to win straight up. There's a chance, right? It is their map pick, and their search has been fine lately. Like, this new lineup hasn't been good, specifically in hardpoint. They only won 1 hardpoint with this new lineup, and it was against Paris in that crazy upset win. But otherwise, they are getting destroyed pretty regularly in hardpoint. But they've put up some solid performances in search and destroy. And actually, like last week, Cloud9 two overload wins, both on Scar against Vancouver and Boston, so not the stiffest of competition. But you look at Toronto's like vetoes for overload, like we are not going to play Scar. That is not happening, right? If we're ruling out Cloud9 have a very low chance to win map 1, they have a very low chance to win map 3 if it's Den or if it's exposure. It all comes down to search. And I do think the plus 240 is valuable. So if you're going to look at anything, look at Cloud9 in map 2, there's a chance that it is their map pick. If that's the case, it probably should be closer to a coin flip. I would probably still take Toronto as a slight favorite in that, even if it is Cloud9's map pick. But I don't know. I mean, it's search and destroy, weird things happen, and Cloud9 haven't been awful in that game mode with the new lineup. And Toronto haven't been anything super scary in that one either. So that's the only place I look at this one. So if Cloud9 are going to get this thing done, it looks like it's probably going to have to be two searches, and maybe you can win your hard point pick, maybe. Or if Toronto do something crazy and let Cloud9 pick Scar Overload, maybe then we could get it. But yeah, it's a uphill battle for Cloud9 for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe not the most fun game for a Cloud9 fan here. Riyadh versus Miami. This will be a good game. Minus 120 each way. Riyadh minus 1.5 plus 162. I'm assuming Miami probably 1.5 is probably also the same. Riyadh favored in the hard point. Miami favored in the search, and then Riyadh favored slightly in the overload. My model likes Miami here. I think Miami is a better team. Again, for once, my model is not on Riyadh. For I think the first time ever. Likes Miami in the hard point, roughly equal to what the sports book actually has. I definitely like Miami in the search even more than the sports book. I think the sports book's undervaluing Miami here a bit. And then they're in rough shape in the overload. But still though, I think there's a really good chance of Miami pulling off a win here. I think Miami money line and Miami in the hard point. I like that bet. I like it. What do you have here?
Yeah, I prefer the Falcons side of this, if anything. But yeah, this does feel like a true coin flip to me. You have the one team that's better in hardpoint, and that's Falcons. You have one team that's better in search, and that's clearly Heretics. And then I think you have to give the edge to Falcons in the overload. And yeah, I think just going based off of my numbers, like Falcons are a slight favorite in map 1. They're a bigger underdog in map 2, and then they're a solid favorite in map 3. So just the fact that if Miami were to get to that game 5, they would be likely to win. If we can't go the distance, I like Falcons in that case. But yeah, it's tricky. I'd rather back the team that I feel better about in hard points than in searches. And that just goes to the fact that like we play hard point more often, we have more data points to say, okay, this team is good in this mode. Searches, right? You can have a run of round 11s where you win, a run of round 11s where you lose. But yeah, it's like Miami is definitely the better search team. Riyadh, like since Major 2 qualifiers have kicked off, have been one of the best hardpoint teams in the game. So I think my numbers are maybe a little short on Riyadh in map 1 specifically. I think they're about right in map 2 and about right in map 3. So if I'm going to look at anything, I'll look at Falcons. But yeah, I'm more excited just to honestly watch this one and see how it plays out. Hopefully, it's a good one that goes the distance. It feels like it should be one that goes the distance, but we've seen it a lot this year where these end quickly. One team comes out hot and dominates. So we'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, hoping that this is a fun series.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. This one should be pretty good. Last match of the Friday, Paris versus Optic minus 5 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 163. Optic minus 225 in the hard point, minus 250 in the search, and minus 250 in the overload. My model loves Optic here. I'm even taking that minus 1.5 here. Weirdly lower in the hard point on me and also on yours as well, but very high in the search and the overload. My model is out on Paris, like just really out on them. And I bet Minnesota against them. That paid off. And then literally last Sunday, I was sitting there and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Let's fire off on Vancouver over Paris. And that cashed instantly. Like literally plus 1.5 cashed after 2 max. So I'm just down to fade this team. This Optic team seems unbeatable. This line, honestly, I think I got this already. I think I'm like minus 150. I honestly, I don't think, I think it's ticked up, so I think I had a better number. But honestly, I don't see why this line seems too short. I don't know. I got this at minus 125, I think. I think I bet this 125 early. And it's now, there you go. There's the kiss of death, right? The second, whenever we get closing line value on these, we get killed. But no, I honestly, and again, it's scary. Every time anybody says this, I can't see this happening. It always happens. But honestly, I don't know why this line was so short. Honestly, I don't see where this belief in this Paris team comes from, especially not against the top team in the league. Do you agree with that here?
Yeah, no. So this might be the match where we disagree the most, honestly, this season. I don't disagree with you that like Optic are a steamroller right now. Like they are clearly the best team in the league. You can argue like they maybe should have won Major One, and these were the two teams that were there at the end. Optic swept Paris pretty convincingly in the winners bracket final. Paris barely weasel their way back into the grand finals, and then it goes all the way to a map 7. Paris, very good in the search and destroys. That carries them to the win and puts a damper on the Optic crowd there. But yeah, you can make a case like Optic were just a better team that day. It didn't work out. That's part of the tough thing about you don't get that extra life when you're the winners bracket team that makes the grand finals. Like it's a double elimination tournament until the last match. And I'm sure maybe if we played another best of 7, Optic win that. We'll see how that shakes out in our hypothetical world. But yeah, since then, right, Optic have just crushed Paris 3-0 to start the Major 2 qualifiers. Everything looks fine. 0-4 since, and some ugly losses like losses to Cloud9, the new look Toronto team, Minnesota, and then last week with Vancouver, who we know are not that great either. This to me is just out of principle, right? This is probably the lowest point in the season for Paris. You're buying them, you want to buy the dip in the stock market, and we are at the dip, I think. And you don't want to buy a team that's at the absolute pico top of the market. And I think Optic are there. This is insane that Major One was not that long ago. Paris won it, albeit it was close. And the odds for that match were very close. And since then, it has just shifted drastically. Paris hardpoint is concerning me. I think they are a good enough team to work that out. The issue with them is just like they were so reliant on hardpoint over the course of the year. Their search was okay. Their overload was shaky. Their search and their overload are still in that middling category for me, and their hardpoint has come down a fair bit. They're not like just destroying teams anymore. They're in a lot of dogfights now. They've slipped up a couple times in some close losses, but that'll happen if you play teams close. So I just think out of principle, Paris should not be this big of an underdog this quickly. I think my model might be a touch high on their odds to win. I've got them at 32% to win. Just based on recent results, I'd maybe bump that down to 25% to win. But if you look at the money line, right, they're plus 333. That's more around 22% to win. So I still think the market is a touch low on Paris, all things considered. And if Paris can figure out that hard point, maybe they can cover that 1.5 without even winning a search or an overload. So to me, I just want Paris to show up, right? Make this a fun series, because right now it looks like Optic are just going to 3-0 everybody, but they can make this a fun series, I think. And boy, do I want to see that, because I don't want this league to just be one team crushing everybody. So I like Paris a little bit. I don't know if they'll win. I don't think they'll win, but I just want them to play tough. That's all I need.
Need that plus 1.5 there. Yeah, plus 1.5, plus 120. We'll see. Again, I'm skeptical, but we'll have to see. I don't know. Saturday match number 1, Minnesota versus Carolina. Minnesota minus 138 in the money line. Minnesota minus 1.5, plus 175. Minnesota the favorite in the hard point and the search, but Carolina the favorite in the overload. Yeah, I like my model loves Minnesota here, especially in the search. I'm not completely sure why it loves them so much in the search, but they are very good at search. And the books have them priced at minus 150. I feel in some ways that the books are a bit soft on the individual game lines. I think there is probably some value there, but that's a conversation probably for another day. I like Minnesota. I don't love the minus 1.5. I think that's about value, but maybe something in the hard point. I don't know. It's not great. Minnesota's hardpoint is fine some days, but then other days it's not as great. But I'll take the Minnesota money line here, minus 138. I could take that. What plays do you have here?
Yeah, I would lean to the Minnesota side of things here, but yeah, to me this feels like almost a coin flip, but not quite. I've got it as, yeah, 59-41 in favor of Minnesota. Slightly favored in hardpoint and in search. The overload is close. I give the edge there to Ravens. So market, I think, is about right on this one. Both teams up and down lately. Both teams, I'd say, are, yeah, squarely in that same tier of teams, just hovering in the middle somewhere, sixth, seventh, eighth overall in the standing. Yeah, I'm not seeing much in terms of map vetoes. Like these teams are built the same, like both pretty reliant on search and destroy, not a bad thing. But yeah, that's their bread and butter. Minnesota do it a little better than Ravens. But yeah, I think you can say if Ravens win, it's probably through an overload and they split the hard points and searches otherwise. If Minnesota win, maybe they can bank two search wins, or maybe they get the slight upset and overload. Either way, feels like overload is the key game mode here, which is the case when a lot of these sort of close teams face off against each other. Yeah, hopefully it's a good series. This feels like another one that could go the distance. That would be a lot of fun if it does. But yeah, I guess if I had to take a side, I'd take Minnesota. But yeah, it feels about right on the market there.
Next up, Vancouver versus Toronto. Toronto minus 300 on the money line. Toronto minus 1.5, minus 125. Minus 200 in the hard point, minus 175 in the search, and minus 225 in the overload. Yeah, my model is weirdly basically to market here. Some slight value on Vancouver. I'm not touching it, but some slight value on Vancouver. I was a little surprised by that. I would have thought it would have been much more lopsided, but my model is really big on Toronto and the overload. And as is yours, too. Yours is not that far behind. But I was expecting the model to be more in Toronto. Again, it's as I said, even then, Toronto is one of those middle teams, and Vancouver is one of the quote unquote lower teams. Weird that even this way they're still this close, like a 65-35. That's 65-70-30. Like it should still be a bit bigger for Toronto. The fact that minus 1.5 is only minus 125, a little concerning for Toronto. We'd have to see what the spread is in here for the hard point, but yeah, if I'm betting anything, I think I'm betting Vancouver here. Do you feel the same, or are you going to get behind Toronto here?
Yeah, no, this is a weird one, but I'm with you. I think I like the underdog a little bit here. Not a ton, but yeah, it's just a weird series where, like, Vancouver, horrible overload team, and that's been the case all year. Toronto, very good overload team, but a lot of that is predicated on one map, and that is Den. They've played it 10 times. They're 8-2. To me, second power ranked in the league. That you could argue that maybe that they should be first. Yeah, they love to play Den Overload, and teams play them on it, and they get crushed. And it was a whole thing last week when Boston decided to square up with Toronto on Den Overload. And I said last week in the podcast, because I was like, Boston could make it interesting. I think you should veto Den, even though you like to play it, because Toronto are that good. And sure enough, Toronto 8-0, perfect game in Overload. So maybe Boston will listen next time. And maybe some other teams in the league, like Vancouver Surge, should just auto veto Toronto on Den Overload, because 2-5 on Exposure and Scar does not sound that good, and that's what Toronto is in Overload. So as bad as Vancouver is in map threes, I think they have a fighting chance so long as they veto Den, but we'll see if they do that. That's the one thing that's holding me up on this, is like my Toronto to win map 3 number is enormous, as is yours, and I think those numbers are correct if it is Den Overload. But maybe Vancouver are smart enough to veto that out, and maybe it's more, I don't know, a Toronto like 70-30 in that map 3 or 60-40, somewhere in there. But yeah, Vancouver have shown some promise in hard points lately. Their search is okay, and I haven't seen a ton from Toronto. Like, I know they're better with this new lineup, but I don't know if they're like justified to be a minus 300 favorite against a Surge team that's trending up a little bit. I Surge ever so slightly here. I think they can compete in hard points and in searches. The real question is just map 3. What map do we get, and how does that play out? So if you're Vancouver, veto Den, please. Teams across the league, unless you're Optic, like, just auto veto that map because it's Toronto's bread and butter, and teams just won't stop playing them on it. Yeah, a weird match, I think, on Saturday. I'm curious to see how this plays out, but yeah, I think Toronto win this, but I think Vancouver can at least make it interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. Saturday, match three, Thieves minus 10,000 on the money line, minus 2.5, minus 200, minus 2,000 in the hard point, minus 334 in the search, and minus 2,000 in the overload. Yeah, pretty much my model again, like in the plus 2.5, but I don't believe that. Again, 80% across the board win every map. I'm not touching that. That's not a thing for me. I'm not touching that. Yeah, give me. I'm not touching this. Probably even the 61 is still. I'm not betting minus 200. I don't love that. Maybe the minus. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Maybe the minus 1.5 gets thrown into a parlay. Maybe, probably not though, because I think now, as we've seen with the 3 O's, that's worthless. Yeah, if you wanted to convince me to bet like Thieves minus hardpoint spread map one, sure, okay. Everything else, this game is basically unbettable. What do you see here?
Yeah, another tricky one with Cloud9 where it's good luck. You're probably not going to win, but can you win a map? That's the question that these series are leading us to. I don't know. Again, I just look at the map 2 as winnable. It's the same price as it was for the Cloud9 against Toronto game on Friday, plus 240. I don't think it's a bad idea to just take the plus 240 Friday afternoon, take it again Saturday afternoon, see if Cloud9 can come through in at least one of those, because I think they're live to do. But if you're just going to take one, I'd rather take the plus 240 against Toronto in map 2. I just think Thieves are a slightly better search team overall. Map 1's maybe winnable for Cloud9. I know they only had the one hardpoint win against Paris, and that was weeks ago at this point. But Thieves and hardpoint have been a little shaky lately. Split last week versus Miami, lost both against Vegas, albeit one was a pretty close loss. That was also last week. Split against Optic the week prior to that, which honestly is good. The one win was very close, but I don't know. They've just been ho hum in hard points lately. Maybe Cloud9 can shock the world and win a close one, but yeah, all signs point to if Cloud9 win the map, probably going to be the search and destroy. So I would just avoid the plus 2.5 at plus 150 and move that to a map 2, maybe at plus 240. Yeah, that's where we're at this point with Cloud9. Maybe they can make it to map 4, maybe not, but yeah, it feels like Thieves should win this pretty easy.
Moving on to the last match here on Saturday, Paris versus Boston. Paris minus 600, Paris minus 1.5, minus 225, minus 350 in the hard point, minus 200 in the search, minus 250 in the overload. Yeah, my model disagrees. My model has Paris as significantly lower, plus 1.5, plus 162, plus 350. Again, is Paris very low right now? Yes. Does that mean that Boston is better than them? They're roughly on par with Vancouver, and Vancouver to take them down 3-1. But is now all of a sudden is at the bottom for Paris, and then they're going to rebound? I don't know. I think it's maybe worth a shot. But again, how far could Paris have fallen in like a month since winning Major One? That's the thing. So I don't know. I think the plus 1.5 isn't the worst bet. Maybe a hard point spread here isn't the worst bet either because Paris has been specifically weak in hard point. But I don't know. It's I with such low stakes, I take the plus 1.5 on Boston and maybe some Boston plus money bets. But other than that, I don't see a ton of value on the Paris minus 1.5. Are you liking taking a shot here on Boston as well?
So this is a tough one for me because for weeks now, my model has shown some value in Boston here and there. They've come through occasionally. They've looked pretty bad at some other times. That's just what they are. Like they're not a good team, but they are volatile. Like they can beat a good team on the right day. And I think this week for Paris is just so bizarre. Like you have to play Optic, right? You have to play the hottest team in the CDL by far at your low point in the year. You're trying to figure things out, and Optic is the first match you get on Friday. And then you have to follow that up with a team that's on the opposite end of the table, a team that is very weird, hard to figure out in Boston. Yeah, this one is so tricky to me. I looked into the map 3 stuff because my model shows pretty 50-50 in that specific game mode. That probably is going to have to be a win for Boston if they want to win the series. But yeah, across Den, Exposure, and Scar, both of these teams are pretty close. So I do think that 50-50 is accurate. And then it just comes down to what do you believe in Paris Hardpoint? I still think they got it. I know it's been rough lately, but I think they should be able to beat Boston easily. I'm curious to see where this price goes after the Optic game because either that goes how you think it will, an Optic win in a 3-1 fashion or even a sweep, right? How far does the price fall on this Paris versus Boston game? I think Paris will be the favorite no matter what still, but could it drop to minus 250, minus 200 on the money line as opposed to minus 600? Because right now, this is priced in a place where it's like, if Paris haven't had any struggles and Boston have been ho hum, this is where I would price it out at. Where Paris are very big favorites, they're not enormous favorites like the minus 10,000s that you see, but they're still solidly favored. So yeah, to me, right, if you're Boston, you got to win map three. That is almost a non-negotiable. And then if Paris's hardpoint struggles stay there, I think Boston are okay enough to maybe win one of those. And then, yeah, win a search. I think it's got to be one of each game mode if you're Boston. But yeah, it's just this one I'll keep a close eye on. I'm not sure if it's going to be a good match, but it's a huge match in terms of seeding. Boston right now my projected 11 team, 11 seed, which would not make the tournament at all. Paris are in the play-in right now, so if you're Boston and you can get this is huge. But yeah, I'll have a lot of attention on this game. I just have no clue what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so. It should be an interesting game. It definitely should be interesting. Moving on to Sunday, match one, Minnesota versus Boston. Minnesota minus 300 on the money line. Minnesota minus 1.5, minus 120. Minnesota minus 200 in the hard point, minus 188 in the search, and minus 175 in the overload. Yeah, my model likes Minnesota here, and I tend to agree. Again, huge boost here in the search. Also likes them in the hard point a little bit here. Only really likes Boston in the overload. I don't hate the minus. I don't hate throwing the money line into something, and I don't hate the minus 1.5 here either. What do you have here?
Yeah, so I'm closer to market on everything. I guess my numbers are shaded a little bit towards Boston, which they have been lately. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really hard to talk about Boston because of how up and down they are. Like just last week's results. I guess last week's were somewhat expected. Like they win against Cloud9 3-1. The hard points were very comfortable wins. The search was a very comfortable win, which was good to see because we know Boston can be very shaky in that game mode and they won 6-2 against a Cloud9 team that has been okay in searches lately, but they dropped the ball in overload. That's not a great look. And then they turn around on Sunday and get swept by Toronto very easily. They did not listen to me. They played Scar overload. I don't know why. Minnesota are a better team. I think that is definitely the case. They're better in hardpoint, but Minnesota to me aren't a great hardpoint team either. They're win one, lose one in a lot of series. Their search is amazing. I have them as a second graded search team in the league. Den is really their only bad map. They've only played it once, but that's been the only map where they've shown some real concern on. Otherwise, their map pool is pretty deep. And their overload map pool is interesting. They love to play Den, which a lot of teams like to play Den. But yeah, it's just, I think Minnesota are just a touch better. I think it's probably a Minnesota 3-1, but Boston are the kind of team where weird stuff happens. They can beat a good team on their good days. I don't know. It's a whole lot of I don't know with Boston. I'd like to see a trend of success for them before I commit again. But yeah, an interesting one nonetheless. Anytime Boston's playing. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, Vancouver versus Miami. Miami minus 250 on the money line. Miami minus 1.5, minus 110. Minus 188 in the hard point, 163 in the search, and minus 188 in the overload. Yeah, my model likes Miami here. Like that money line, like the minus 1.5, and love the search and the overload here. I see quite a bit of value here on Miami. I think your model also kind of agrees. I think this is Miami all around.
I guess, yeah. The one thing that gives me pause is Vancouver's hard point lately has been picking up a little, and Miami are a little all over the place in hard point, like Boston. Like Miami is a much better team than Boston, let me be clear, but Miami can go very up and down very easily. Their search and destroys have been awesome lately. Their overloads and hard points, a little bit of win lose going on. But Yeah, I guess I'd side with Miami even with the Vancouver improvement over the last week or so. But yeah, I don't have a ton of conviction on that either. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of these series just feel like market is about right. And we're starting to get to that point in the year where it's like it is maybe harder to find an edge in any given match just because we have so many data points for all these teams. The map pool is becoming much clearer for a lot of these teams. So yeah, Miami, huge edge in map three. I think that is what gets them over the top. But if Vancouver can continue that hard point success, maybe chain together a search here or there, maybe that won't matter. But yeah, ultimately the map three is the decider for me, and I think that's why Miami probably get this done in like a 3-1 fashion.
The 3-1 minus 1.5 minus 110. That's a pretty attractive number there, I think. But it is Miami. They could just lose this outright. So you never know. Third match, second last match of the week, Riyadh versus Thieves. Thieves minus 163 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 137, minus 138 in the hard point, minus 125 in the search, and then minus 163 in the overload. Yeah, my model likes Thieves here a little bit. Again, weird that my model has always been super, super high on Riyadh, and all of a sudden it's actually now it's like, yeah, they're okay. They're not that great. But the thing is, to be fair though, the teams they beat, right, FaZe and Ultra, they don't look as great anymore, right? Yeah, I mean, I have Riyadh in good shape here in the hard point here, but Thieves is a huge favorite in search. That's probably why this number is a bit higher. And then that's pretty close too. I don't know. This one should be interesting. I think my model is just saying if it goes to a game five, just Thieves have it. And that is nice to have. But at the same time, it's just, I don't know. I don't think I want to play this. I definitely don't want to play the minus 1.5 here. And that money line might be a bit high for me. I don't know. This one might be a kind of a watch. And it should be a good game to watch. I'm interested to watch it. What about you? What do you see here?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think there's a ton separating these teams now, and that is reflected in the market price. Like Thieves are only minus 163 to win, Riyadh plus 120 to win. So if you think Falcons win and you're right, like you're not getting a ton back, you're getting something. But yeah, I think again it should be more like a coin flip. Like Riyadh have been a better hardpoint team over the Major 2 qualifier period than LA Thieves. They've also been a better overload team. That's closer, but Riyadh have been awesome in that game mode as well. The one hiccup is Search and Destroy, where they haven't been awful, but they are clearly not a superior team, an inferior team to LA Thieves in Map 2 and Map 5 if we get there. But just the fact that Riyadh have been so rock solid reliable in those hard points gives me some faith to take them in the plus 1.5. So I think, yeah, this is a very intriguing matchup. If you asked me like a month ago if this would have been, I would have been like, yeah, maybe, but Falcons are kind of whatever across the board, but they really have picked up some steam in hardpoint. And I think that translates into overload. And I think those two modes going up at the same rate for that team is really promising. If they can make some tweaks in search and destroy or weasel out a round 11 win here or there, I think that's very live. So Falcons are just a team that I like right now with how they're set up. Like, I think the search and destroy will come with time. And even if it doesn't, you're showing that you can at least string together some hard points, win some overloads here and there. I like Falcons to at least force the map five. And heck, mate, they could, yeah, very easily get this done in like a 3-1 or a sweep. Do not be shocked if Falcons come out and win this pretty quickly, because as we've seen, this sort of thing happens this year. Like the underdog team, if they're on it that day, they can win in a 3-0 fashion, not without too much difficulty. So I like Falcons ever so slightly. I think we got a great match on our hands. And if you're Falcons, hopefully you can get this done before the map five, because if it does go the map five, I think you're probably an underdog to win at that point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Up here, Sunday match number 4, last match of the weekend, FaZe versus Ravens. FaZe is minus 180 in the money line, minus 1.5 plus 110, minus 175 in the hard point, minus 125 in the search, and minus 163 in the overload. And yeah, I like FaZe in a little bit of a bounce back here. I think they are a better team than Carolina. Don't love the minus 1.5 though, but I do. I definitely like the search here, and I like Carolina in the overload. So yeah, I think it's FaZe is favored in this game as they should be. And I think if there is a play here, my play probably here is on FaZe. Do you agree with that, or do you want to take a shot here on Carolina?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Vegas proved last week in that win over Thieves that they're not completely dead. It was a close series. It went to that game five, but the fact that Vegas were able to get two hard point wins, albeit one was very close, that was promising, right? The hard point for them has been their shaky game mode throughout the year. Their search has definitely fallen off over the last few weeks, but I still think they can bounce back and string together some search and destroys if needed. And yeah, their overload is interesting because on Scar specifically 0 and 3 on the year. The other two maps combined 11 and 7. So not amazing numbers, but if you can just focus on those two maps moving forward, like you should be able to win more overloads than you lose. But yeah, and like Ravens aren't a bad team. I just think Vegas maybe found something in that series versus LA Thieves. The series against Optic clearly did not go their way, but Optic are a whole nother animal right now. But yeah, just good to get one on the board for Vegas. This is a pretty big match in terms of seeding. Like both of these teams kind of project as a play-in team right now. So whoever wins this, you should get a nice boost up, maybe increase your chances to just make the bracket automatically. But yeah, I think Vegas are a better team. And this is a weird situation where I'm a little shorter than market on map one and map three, and I'm basically right at map two, yet my money line price shows some value on Vegas. So maybe there's just some weird mispricing going on. Same thing with the -1.5. I'm not that high on Vegas in hardpoint, but for some reason the -1.5 shows a smidge of value. So maybe just the market is a little off in those two areas. But overall, yeah, I think if you're Vegas, like this is a pretty good price considering that we think of them as a much better team than the Royal Ravens. Hopefully Vegas get it done, but yeah, I could definitely see Ravens making it interesting if the old, I guess, new Vegas shows up, whatever it is. But yeah, nonetheless, Vegas should be able to get this done.
Yeah. Our model picks for this week, I grabbed Optic -163 against Paris. I think I got that at a different price. I think I got that at a much lower price, but it's at 163 now. Still like it at -163. I've got Minnesota versus Carolina outright, and I've got Miami -1.5 versus Vancouver. Yeah, I decided to just completely abandon Cloud9 this week. I think that might be a good idea based off of the results of last week. What do you have for this week?
Yeah, so this might be a first, but our number one picks are going straight up head to head. I've got Paris
Uh,
covering 1.5 versus Optic. I know they've been bad. I know Optic have been amazing, but right, it's just this price has gotten too out of control for me. I think Paris, if they can find their way in hardpoint, can force the map five just through those, but they still have maps two and map three to work with. So I'm just hoping it's an interesting series because I do not want to see Optic just run away 11 and 0 undefeated at Major 2 and win that easy. I think we need some contenders, and I think Paris are a clear team that can be that considering what they did at Major 1. I've got Vegas, yeah, to win straight up versus Ravens. This was a last minute switch for me, but yeah, I just think they are a better team. This price is not that bad. I liked what I saw versus LA Thieves a week ago. I just think, yeah, they're a better team, and this price is maybe a touch short and maybe mispriced for some reason. And I'm going back to the well with Falcons against LA Thieves. Again, I think these teams are very close, but you look at just the major two qualifiers, Riyadh have been better in hardpoint and in overload. The searches are another story, but I think those two modes alone can carry Riyadh to that map five and make it at least an interesting series. But do not be shocked if Falcons can get that done quicker.
yeah, I agree with that as well. Combined model plays. Here's what we've got. We are apparently going back to Cloud9 again against. I believe is it Ultra
Toronto.
Toronto?
Yeah.
Yeah. Optic map 3, Minnesota money line, Vancouver money line map 1, Toronto map 3. Those are the same game, I believe, right? That's Vancouver versus Toronto.
Hmm.
Cloud9 map 1, Boston money line +1.5 map 3, Minnesota map 2, Boston map 3, full slate of Miami, full send there against Surge, Riyadh map 3, and then the Vegas money line. Other than that is it for us for this week. I've been loving the 11 games a week. one more this week of it, and then one more week after that, and then we will have Major 2, which is going to be a little bit different than the other majors. But other than that, we'll have it out by that podcast will be out by the 19th. And other than that, yeah, we'll see you then. See you, everybody.